Hello! In today's video, we're going to be talking about the 2026 World Cup. A World Cup that, in these weeks, is on everyone's lips because we already know the groups and the start date is getting closer and closer. And in recent days, there has also been a lot of talk about the possibility that FIFA may decide to begin implementing new rules, innovative ones, and some that, for me, are quite controversial. Let's start by talking about the first change. A change that for me could be very controversial, but that has been discussed for quite some time now. The rule that angers the most, that confuses the most, and that divides football the most, the famous offside, could be close to an absolute revolution. The International Football Association Board has once again put the modification of the offside rule, promoted by Arsène Wenger, up for debate. An initiative that had been shelved for 2 years and that is now regaining a lot of momentum, with the possibility of being voted on in March 2026. This could be applied for the first time at the next World Cup and fundamentally change the way the game is played, defended, and analyzed. Today, the rules consider a player to be offside if their head, torso, or leg, totally or partially, is closer to the opponent's goal than the second-to-last defender. Just a millimeter of a shoulder or a foot is enough for a player to be offside and for the VAR to disallow the play. That extreme precision, celebrated by some and detested by many others, has become one of the biggest sources of controversy and debate in football. The Wenger Law proposes exactly the opposite, that an attacker should only be penalized if their entire body is ahead of the second-to-last defender. In other words, if any part with which they can play the ball, a foot, the head, the shoulder, is on the same line or behind the opponent, the action would be valid. In a sport where dozens of goals are disallowed for differences that are almost imperceptible to the human eye, the impact would be enormous because there would be many more goals, more fluidity, and fewer interruptions. The origin of this project is a clear idea from Wenger himself. Football should be a game of movement, not of geometry. For the Frenchman, technology has taken the rules to a place where the attacking spirit has been constrained by digital lines that measure fractions of a second and a centimeter. With VAR and the semi-automated system detecting offsides that are impossible to see with the human eye, the feeling of injustice has become routine, even when the decision is correct according to the current rules. Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, publicly backed the study of this attacking modification, as he said when referring to the return of this proposal to the center of the debate. The goal is to recover a game that is less stop-start, more natural, and more attractive to the public. This rule has already been tested in real youth tournaments played in Sweden, Italy, and the Netherlands, in both the men's and women's competitions. The results showed an increase of more than 10% in the number of goals, and a notable reduction in the time it takes VAR to review a play. Although these are lower-level competitions, those data pushed FIFA to reactivate a discussion that seemed to have been forgotten. This vote will take place on March 1, 2026, and it will require 6 affirmative votes to be approved. Representatives from FIFA, UEFA, and the British nations, which historically have decisive weight in reforms, will be voting. For now, there is no consensus, and that is the main question mark. While the proposal generates enthusiasm, it also generates resistance, especially among those who fear an excessive imbalance in favor of attack. Let's think about it for a second. Imagine teams that today play very high up the field, almost at midfield, for example, Barcelona, and that already suffer a lot with offside calls. They practically end up catching the vast majority of opponents offside by a hand, a shoulder, a body length, by a shoulder that's slightly more tilted. Now imagine this rule, in which, if the entire body is not ahead, the play is valid. It would completely change the way teams defend, play, attack, and how they position themselves on the field. We would have teams practically sitting inside their own 6-yard box, waiting, because any play could trigger the fact that what used to be a crystal-clear offside would no longer be one. But this debate, or this rule that may be modified, which for me is one of the most controversial we've seen in the world of football, is not the only thing that could be implemented as something new and innovative starting with the next World Cup. And that's because for the 2026 World Cup, which will be held in North America, there is serious consideration of granting greater powers to VAR. As you know, today VAR can review whether there is an offside in a goal, it can review red cards, and it can review situations involving mistaken identity of a player. But there are many other situations during a match in which it has no authority. Now, there is serious discussion about including VAR interventions in corner kick situations and in the review of second yellow cards. According to the British newspaper The Times, FIFA has received approval to test these new powers starting at the next World Cup. The argument is that in a World Cup, where so much is at stake, decisions that can change a match need to be as precise as possible, and that it would be a serious problem if, for example, a corner kick awarded by mistake or a wrongly issued second yellow card altered the final result of a World Cup. That is the argument, and it has some logic. But let's break it down and analyze it. I think the idea of reviewing second yellow cards is quite logical. Let's see. If a player is shown a second yellow card that doesn't actually correspond, I think it's fine to be able to review that card and, obviously, take it away, because at the end of the day it results in an expulsion. The problem I see here is that many of those second yellow cards, in many cases, depend on the referee's judgment at that moment. It's a play that, for him, might deserve a yellow card, or that he understands, perhaps due to an accumulation of fouls, warrants a yellow card and he ends up sending the player off. It's not the same as a red card, which, as we know, is given in exceptional situations like a tackle from behind, a last-man foul, or an act of aggression. In those cases, VAR can intervene and say, "Hey, you saw that wrong." But a second yellow card is much more complicated, because VAR would have to modify a decision that depends on the referee's judgment at that moment. And the range of plays in which a player can be cautioned is much broader than those in which a player can be directly sent off. I don't see it as a bad idea, but it seems quite complicated to implement, and for VAR to have a clear impact there. The other issue seems even more difficult to me, because if in every play where there's a corner kick we have to stop, look, see if the referee puts his hand to his ear and gets told whether it's a corner or not, the match is going to become much longer. I mean, if, as it is with the few interventions VAR currently has in specific plays, matches get delayed 3, 4, or 5 minutes every time VAR has to intervene, the last thing we need now is that every time there's a corner kick, where maybe the ball touched someone or maybe it didn't, VAR has to review it, notify the referee, and have the decision changed. I understand that what's always being sought is justice and fairness, and that sometimes a corner kick maybe shouldn't have been given and ends up being awarded, or the opposite. But the same thing happens with throw-ins, and with many other plays where the referee can make a mistake because he can't see it in line. You can't intervene in every single play, otherwise the match will become eternal, and VAR will end up being the absolute protagonist, and I don't see much sense in that. The corner kick review doesn't make much sense to me. As for the second yellow card, I think it's fine for VAR to have that authority, but I'll say it again. I think it will be very difficult to implement because there are yellow cards that only the referee truly knows why he showed them, and they respond to his own judgment. It's not the same as a red card where he might see an excessive action or a last-man foul, and then, with VAR, they tell him, "This wasn't for a straight red, but simply for a yellow card." But I'd like to read your opinion in the comments. What do you think about these 3 rules that FIFA wants to implement starting with the next World Cup in 2026? The Wenger Law on offside, the implementation of VAR for corner kicks, and the implementation of VAR for second yellow cards. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and without further ado, I'll leave it there for today. See you tomorrow.